Good evening. It's November 18th, and you are back with the FloTrack College Cross Country Ranking Show presented by HOKA. I'm Ryan Fenton alongside Ashley Tishins, and we will be joined once again by our guest, analyst, Matt Baxter, and we'll bring him on in a little bit. But before we do, Ashley, we're getting down to it. We're the week of NCAA Cross Country. We were together for the Cola show with the projections on Friday after the regional. How have things been since I saw you Friday? A lot of things have shaken out since then.
I mean, it finally feels like we're in the final stretch, you know, the date that we've had circled on our calendars, November 23rd, all season is finally, we're almost there. And I'm just excited to be able to go out to Wisconsin and see all these teams finally compete together.
Yeah, we'll be out there starting on Thursday to get ready for all that action. And before we do that, we got this show. It's one of our last ranking shows of the season, and we want to call on a special guest on the women's side of this competition, Mr. Sean Cleary from West Virginia, joining us out, I think, from the track. So, Sean, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Hey, Ryan, Ashley, thanks for having me. Doing well here. Just enjoying a 65-degree day here in Morgantown before we board a plane in 48 hours.
Well, it's been an exciting season. We've been talking about it throughout our show here, but it's really been an exciting season for you guys. I want to say the West Virginia women feel like have been the most underrated team of the season. I was looking back through the rankings, both FloTrack rankings, the coaches' rankings, and I think you might have snuck into the rankings, you know, in the 28th spot or something like that at some point in the season, but it really wasn't until about a month ago, a little less than a month ago, where you guys shot up to 5th in the rankings. So I just want to get your perspective on the season coming into this. Where were you guys at, and are you surprised at where the team sits now, at least in the eyes of those outside of this?
You know, on October 1st, if I remember correctly, we were ranked 10th in the region, the Mid-Atlantic region, on October 1st. I think the national poll saw it a little bit differently, and I think they gave us a little bit of love. You know, we had a good roster on paper, but some of those women in the top 7 really had to make big breakthroughs for us to take another jump. To answer you truthfully, I would say I would not have thought on the 1st that we would be sitting here this far inside of the top 10, according to some of the polls. But I did feel that we had a top 10 team if we nailed the NCAAs back at camp. So that's been our goal for the season. We thought we should make nationals. We thought that we had an opportunity with the front-running talent that we have to be inside the top 10. So that's where we are this week, and we feel very grateful.
You talked a little bit about, earlier in the season, ranked 10th in the Mid-Atlantic region poll. You go in then this weekend and you win the region. You come away with a regional title. I believe you're first in 20 years, I believe.
It's been a while. Our first was 20 years ago. We've won since then, but it's been over a decade, so it has been a while.
Talk to me about, you know, just seeing your squad, I guess, progress throughout the season to this point where you win a regional title. You're one of, could argue, you know, one of those contenders for a podium spot potentially at nationals. Like, what have you seen from this squad to come away with some big wins here?
Well, I think if you go back to that 10th place ranking, I think in the defense of the Mid-Atlantic, our ranker, I feel in September I didn't run, let's just call it the varsity team. We lined up the first week of October at Louisville, so we'd put teams out there in September that did a great job for who they were, and they competed for West Virginia very well, but they certainly weren't a nationally ranked team. So I think as we put the team out there for 2 or 3 times in September, we were probably ranked based on those performances. To be honest, I kind of respect the philosophy. I think everyone has a different one, but once we put the team on the line in October and went down to Louisville, I knew at that point that compared to teams, we've been now to the national meet 4 of the last 5, and we've run Louisville most of those years. So I know the course quite well, and I knew where our pack ran in comparison to our front runners. So I knew we were good. Being totally honest with you, some of my closer friends asked me a day or two before the pre-national meet, where do you hope to finish? And I don't remember what I said, but I probably would have said give me 10th right now, and I'll take it and run. So getting 4th that day sort of changed the trajectory of our fall. We've been hitting 5 for 5 in all 4 meets. We've got 5 across the line at, I would say, a worst grade of an A-. So we've probably been one of the most consistent teams in terms of having 5 at that level and being able to nail it at a very high report card. So we're through the Big 12 meet. We're through the Mid-Atlantic Regionals now, and if we get one more of those grades, we should be pretty happy leaving on Saturday.
So you say it changed the trajectory, right? That 4th place finish at pre-nat. So what does that mean, and how did that impact your approach with this team, and potentially what the what that future held for you come Madison?
Well, I think at that point they believed that they were that they at least were a top 10 team, and other experts out there in our world of cross country are putting us as high as 4th and 5th and 6th, somewhere in there. So I think the philosophy has been, if you're going to be ranked 4th, 5th, or 6th, then you may as well take a shot at a trophy. And that's kind of been the motto here. We're going to set ourselves up the best we can. I know there's other really good teams that are sitting in the weeds and kind of licking their chops as to what can happen this weekend. They've probably felt a little slighted. They've probably felt that they're our equal, but that's why we run, and we'll figure all that stuff out on Saturday.
For you as a coach, what do you think has been, in particular, the key to success really for your team this season? Again, we've already talked about a lot of the big performances you guys have had at big meets, including pre-nationals, again, 2nd at Big 12s, and then that Mid-Atlantic regional title. What do you think has been for your team that key to success?
Well, I think we have really strong 6 and 7 runners, but they're both coming off of, a lot of hiccups, and we haven't had to rely on them at this point, although they're slowly coming. But I think the 5 have just not made a mistake. It's so rare. We've done 4 meets in a row with 5 great performances, and I think that's it. Our pack, we have 2 wonderful front runners, but our pack have just been incredible. And one young lady in that group of 3, 4, 5 has a 2-minute college PR at 6K. While times may not matter, 2 minutes is, that's amazing. And we were fortunate enough to get a transfer come in, and it was just the time in her career that she was going to take off and be able to handle the pressure of the second pack in NCAA cross country running. And we have a third who quite honestly has just embraced the pack, and they have been the backbone of our team. Obviously, having Kaylee and Joy out front relieves them with a little bit of pressure, but they've got to do their job, and they've done it wonderfully. So I think that's the key, just the foundation of that pack. They've alternated. They've all been 3rd, they've all been 4th, and they've all been 5th runner in our last 3 races.
Yeah, that top 5 has seemed super strong. You mentioned Kaylee up front, Kaylee McCabe. She was 3rd back in 2021 at this meet, and so coming back to this cross country championships, I'm just curious, like how much having that low stick and that experience up there plays such a big part of like what you guys hope to do this weekend.
It's interesting when people maybe tend to look in from outside on Kaylee's career. Kaylee has one big blemish that she would completely own, and she was 24th in the NCAA meet 2 years ago. She had some serious issues going on that day, and unfortunately was there at 5K with Caitlin in the pack and just couldn't finish it off. But she hasn't really had a bad race at the NCAA meet in terms of what I felt her potential was on the given day. Maybe 6 weeks out, I think there were higher expectations, but it's when you have someone who never runs poorly based on their potential on the day, it's very satisfying for your team to know that she's going to come through for you. And I think as we line up this weekend, they have absolute faith in her. A year ago, she was redshirted intentionally for the Olympic year. We really wanted her on the Olympic team, and she obviously really wanted to be on the Olympic team. So she had her first fall of uninterrupted training. In the time that she's been with us, first year in was the COVID year, and she actually did track work. We worked on a lot of things with her that maybe we wouldn't have in a normal year. And then she went, tried to make the Olympic team, and missed that by 2.0 seconds. And then the next year she went to Worlds, and next year she went to Worlds, and next year she went to the Olympics. So she basically hasn't had a summer, a traditional summer, the way you would kind of want to prepare. So I think the fact that she gets back in there early season, does light workouts, maybe with runners not at her caliber, and slowly works her way up. I would say in the time that I've been here at West Virginia, there's never been a leader who cared more about her team than Kaylee McCabe.
And obviously, it sounds like you have plenty of different pieces to plug in there for that successful West Virginia team, and we're going to see that all on the line this weekend, as you mentioned, at Nationals in Wisconsin. For you as a coach, for this team, what are you hoping to see get put together, I guess, at the biggest high-stakes pressure event of the whole season?
Well, I think, truthfully, when you run at the pre-nationals, which is not normally what we do here at West Virginia, nor Nuttycombe, very rarely do we go to those meets. We kind of stay comfortable on the East Coast and run Penn State's big invitationals. But this year was different. We went to pre-nats. I mean, I just don't see it being, weather conditions, yes, but and maybe the quality of the course and how fast it may or may not be running. But I think they handled the pre-national meet like pros. We've had one of the women has got NCAA experience, even though we've made it quite often lately. The other 6 have not run at the national championships. So I was very relieved leaving pre-nationals that I felt like they handled that big mess with poise and every challenge since. So the kind of the statement over the next few days, we won't talk much about it, but when we do, it'll be they've already basically run a similar competition to the national meet, and they just got to go do again what they did at pre-nationals. And I know that'll be the message of all coaches, but I've got a lot of faith in this team that they're going to go out there and run the types of races we need them to run.
Sean, I want to take a look back. I know we're talking a lot about this weekend, but looking back at your career at West Virginia, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think 33 years, 2 as an athlete, 31 years as a coach there, started as a GA into an assistant coach, and then in 2007 took over the reins as the head coach of the program. And so I look at the history, and I see 2007 9th place finish, 2008 4th place finish, 2009 6th place finish. There, even in 2011 there was an 8th place finish. So you had a string of top 10s really immediately when you took over that head coaching role. Mm-hmm. And for anyone that's followed women's distance running, West Virginia has had a strong program. I know you're from Canada. You have deep ties with the Canadian talent that comes out of there. Just with all those things, how do you compare this year's team to some of those teams that you had early on when you took over, and how they stack up to what you've seen this season?
With regards to that wonderful phase we had through 7, 8, 9, I think 11 and 13. I think in 13 we were 8th again. That was kind of a dream run, to be honest with you. And in the early stage of that part of my career, we had 3 front runners. Probably had 3 front runners as strong as any 3 in the country, and they were very, very underranked and undervalued high school recruits, and they came in and blossomed, and that was kind of the backbone. I think the difference is this team is that team had 3 front runners. I think between them they had 8 All-Americans between the 3 of them, and then the other years that we've made it since, we've had 1 front runner and a nice pack. But now we've got 2. We're so far we've got 2 running at a very high level. But I think the difference in this generation right now is that our pack is closer than any of the other packs that I've had. And the reason I say that, I look at my 3, 4, 5, and I think, yes, they're 60 seconds behind Kaylee, but I don't think there's been a runner in the country that's run as hard as Kaylee has the entire season. And I say that's because of the types of meets we've happened to chosen. We went to Louisville, and the mile was 4:54. We went to pre-nats, and everyone saw what happened with the fast times there. We went to the Big 12, and Joy, her teammate, pushed that pace 9:29 at 3K. And then this past weekend, again, it was 4:54 at the mile, and Kaylee being 4 for 4 right now, she broke the Louisville record, she broke the Big 12 record, and the the Baylor record. She broke the Mid-Atlantic region, which was Sheila Reed's, by 23 seconds. And she just hasn't run an easy 100 meters. She's been on the whole season. And I think when you have a gap from a leader who's that high a quality back to your 4 or 5, I think it's a true gap because there's no tactics being played. So I think the difference in this team right now is that 3, 4, 5, that's a true gap with Kaylee running virtually all out. And I think that's what kind of makes this team exciting and maybe what the potential is this week.
I want to get your perspective just on from the coaching side of this. You know, we talk about that string of finishes when you stepped in as head coach in 2007. You know, when that's happening in real time, or you're like, man, we figured something out, let's just keep it rolling, and we go from 4th to try to get to 3rd and 2nd, and let's get a national title. We're now 10 years removed since I think your last top 10 finish. Yeah. Talk to us about that, just kind of your growth as a coach and experiencing some of that, and just the challenges of being in the NCAA and trying to stay on the top, and how difficult that actually is.
Yeah, I don't know if humbling's the word. I certainly would have thought back in 2007, 8, or 9 that we would have had a legitimate shot at winning the national title by now. We've had a few national champions and a number of Olympians. I think we're at 5 or 6 Olympians since that time period. But you know, yeah, it's I guess it's a little humbling. But at the end of the day, running is just so different now. I think we worked extremely hard back in the 2000s, and I think everybody works extremely hard right now. And so it really does come down to recruiting, and it does come down to a little bit of luck. And let's be honest, the team that gets through this week without injury and sickness is going to stand the best chance of pulling off an upset. And the team that has a terrible time managing those two things are going to look like they choked, when really, realistically, they probably just had some bad luck. But you know, one of the coaches on the weekend, you know, was kind of inspired that we have made a comeback to this level. Definitely an equal peer of ours, and over her career, you know, superior. And I think what it does is it just allows certain coaches and programs to believe that they can still get back near the top and do it the right way.
Well, it's the challenge is an understatement, right? To be good and to stay good. You guys have had a great season this year. Are at near the top of the where you want to be probably right now, heading into a championship weekend, at least as it looks on paper and the way the team's running. So we wish you guys all the best as you head into Madison. You mentioned luck. You know, good luck. There's the good luck side and the bad luck side, and you want it to all kind of go in your direction. And who knows what can happen if that's the case. So we're excited to see how this all plays out up in Madison, Sean. And we thank you for taking some time to talk to us before heading out here in 2 days, I think you said, correct?
Yeah, we leave Wednesday. So
cool.
I appreciate it, guys. Ryan, Ashley, thanks for your time today.
Cool. Thank you. Best of luck out in Madison.
Okay. Bye-bye.
So Ashley, Sean Cleary, we're going to see where his team is ranked today heading into this national championship. I'm excited about that. I want to talk to you a little bit about that interview too, but before we do, I want to bring on our guest analyst, Matt Baxter, who is back with us after missing him on our last show. Matt, welcome. How's it going?
It's going great. Thanks for having me back. Unfortunately, I was dropping the family off at the airport, so I wasn't able to make the last show.
All good, all good. We had to give you a little clap and cheers because since we saw you last, you were the champion at the Pittsburgh 10-mile race that you had run a few weeks back, and by like a minute and a half. It wasn't even like a close thing. It looked like you destroyed everybody.
I tried. It was a last big effort for me before it's now all official out there. I'm doing Valencia Marathon on December 1st. They just put out the fields for it. I think I'm maybe 130th on the list, which is kind of crazy. They're also only taking my 217 from New York. They're not giving me respect on my 214 CAM, which is what it is. But yeah, I was out at Pittsburgh, ran the 10-mile there, had a great time. And funnily enough, I was on the plane to Pittsburgh and had the West Virginia women on the same flight. And I was almost trying to hide a little bit, because the last time I was properly talking about the West Virginia women was when I was giving them a bit of a hard time for their race tactics when they were in Wisconsin. Thankfully, actually, since then, they got it down packed and they're in a great spot. So maybe they listened. I don't know.
Well, that's a good segue into this interview we just had with Sean Cleary, which you got to listen in on. Also, just a quick plug, Valencia Marathon. You'll watch that live on Flo in a few weeks. So just be up front, get some camera time, and we'd love to see you and cheer for you there. But, you know, Sean Cleary just kind of walked through his season, some of his history with his teams. Curious, just any takeaways that you had from listening to what he had to say.
Yeah, I really loved hearing Sean talk about his team. I think it's, especially as an international coming to the US, you don't always have a great appreciation for the history of some of these programs. So it's special to be able to hear someone like Sean talk about his experience with the program and how long he's been around, and seeing the team go through the ebbs and flows that every program goes through. I feel like the West Virginia team is in such a good spot right now because, as Sean was pointing out, they came in as not even necessarily underdogs, just not even in the conversation. They were just another team that was possibly going to be on the start line at nationals. And then as their season progressed, it became very clear that they actually have a great team this season, and the team is healthy and moving forward and progressing really well. So I think that puts them in a really good spot coming into nationals, because they've shown that they're a contender for the podium, having come into the season, possibly maybe just hoping to be at nationals. I don't know, but yeah, I think that's going to be really exciting for them, because I think they kind of have nothing to lose.
Yeah, it's you know, I'm thinking about just, I was asking him about that run they had of top 10 finishes and top 6, 8 finishes in those mid-2000s. And it's, you know, Matt, you're coming from a program that's like, you know, you're part of the dynasty of NAU, and you know they're on the outside of podium contention right now, rankings-wise, but you're still talking a top 6 or whatever it is in the rankings. You know, for someone like Sean, it's just a good reminder of, you know, you take some of those things for granted. Really, in any sport, you see these dynasty runs, and you're just like, oh, they'd have it figured out, and it's just going to keep going. And you hear someone like Sean talking about kind of getting on the cusp of that. You know, he got the podium taste, and they thought they had this momentum, and then you kind of fall away from it for a while. And just a reminder of how challenging it is to keep that level of quality and consistency in a program to be ready at this highest level. It's just crazy to see.
You know, when I was writing this book with Ron Mann, not to necessarily make this about myself, but me and Ron were working on this book, looking at the history of the NAU program, and there was one comment that has just stuck with me ever since, and it was quite a somber reminder of what cross-country is in the NCAA, and it was Ron Mann, who was coaching at NAU, and they were having an incredible run, getting these occasional podium spots, and he was on a flight coming back from nationals with a national trophy. I can't remember exactly what place. Let's just say 2nd, 3rd, 4th, somewhere in there. And one of his friends also happened to be on the flight, who was a coach at another program. And he came up to Ron and he said, "Can I hold the trophy for a bit? I'm about to retire soon, and I never got to hold one of these." And that always stuck with me, that it's so often there's like these hopes that you're going to get on the podium and these great things are going to happen, and most coaches will go their career and it probably just doesn't happen for them. So I think any time when a coach is in a position where you might have a chance of getting on the podium is incredibly special. It is rare as well, but it's exciting to see a coach that knows that his team is kind of on the cusp of that.
Yeah, super exciting season that they've had. So we'll see if they can carry that momentum into Madison this weekend. And speaking of Madison, speaking of where teams will stack up, this is our ranking show, and I think it's time to get into it. And Matt, get some of your analysis. And with that, we're going to start with our men's teams, looking at 11 through 20 after the shakeup from the regional championships this weekend. Ashley, running down through these, you can see some movement here, some decent movement. I look at CBU dropping 8 spots, Eastern Kentucky moving up 7, Washington moving up 8. There's some big swings here, even Stanford there falling outside the top 10.
Yeah, I think here, if you're looking at 11 through 20, you can see the evidence of just how much shifting especially happened with what happened in the West Regional. You see Washington and Oregon, they get those top 2 spots, and so Washington had a good performance. They move up a whole bunch. But then Stanford, who was second at ACCs and was in the top 5 going into this weekend, now drops back to 11th. They were 3rd. They qualify automatically, though, for nationals. So you see some of that movement there. Also, Eastern Kentucky, a big performance for them, 3rd out of the Southeast.
So this is 11 through 20. Now we want to take a look at our top 10. And there it is on the board. You can see this one very different on the front half of these rankings than we saw with 11 through 20, where a little bit of movement and only one new face to these rankings in Virginia after their regional championship there in the Southeast.
Yeah, as you can see, the top 5, it's really just movement between those 5 teams, +1, -1. We now see Oklahoma State assume the number 1 ranking. Again, the defending champs going in to nationals here. They take that spot over from BYU, who had it going into regional weekend. You also have Arkansas moving up to number 3. They dominated the South Central region. And then, as you mentioned, Virginia, they won the Southeast Regional. And so they move into the top 10 there. And you also see Northern Arizona, who performs well, got 3rd in the Mountain Regional, moving up to 6th.
So I want to ask the Mountain guy here. Matt Baxter, NAU, Mountain Region. I'm looking at that shift with Oklahoma State and BYU, and at this point, who knows, right? Where these teams stack up. Should Oklahoma State get the nod over BYU now after not competing against them? I think traditionally for both these squads, getting through to the nationals is kind of almost like a checkbox. Going through their region, but just curious of what you saw between the Mountain and the Midwest. Does Oklahoma State get the nod over BYU at this point, or what's your thoughts?
Yeah, movement following regionals is always tricky because it's just so hard to know how teams are going to take their regionals. BYU, since me being on NAU, we're always facing them at the Mountain region, and they always understood the assignment. They always knew that regionals was solely just a way of advancing to the NCAA meet, and oftentimes they were holding out athletes to account for that. So yeah, it's a little tricky seeing the movement there. But in saying that, I think you could put BYU or Oklahoma State at number 1, and it's pretty easy to justify both of them. So I would almost put like a joint first right now between those 2 teams. I feel like that would be the fairest way of putting it. But man, when I'm looking at these podium spots, and especially now seeing NAU getting themselves back there, bumping down a few spots, it's going to be super exciting to see who's going to finish on the podium here. Because I think between Arkansas, BYU, and Oklahoma State, I think those are going to be the tough ones to bump out of the top 3. I feel like it's going to be one of those teams that's gonna win the title, and those are probably going to fill out the top 3. But that 4th place spot is still an unknown in my books. I think there's probably 3 teams that could finish in 4th, so that one's going to be really exciting.
Yeah. Just talking about the regionals, and you almost got to take it with a grain of salt. I think about the Great Lakes. Notre Dame beats Wisconsin, but you see Wisconsin has a 5-second spread between their crew. Bob Liking, who's won that meet in the past, was back with his team. So they're still in front of Notre Dame in the rankings. And so it's obviously our rankings looking at the season and the body of work, and not just saying, hey, you beat that team in regionals, so you're going to jump ahead of them. Every region's a bit different. If you're in, I'd say like a South region where typically some years that's a 2. I think this year it wasn't that way on the women's side, at least, where you're fighting for 2 teams. You're running all out, but for some of these teams where you're going 5-team deeps, and you pretty much know those teams have a significant gap between the next that are not going to get one of those spots, you approach that a little differently. I think, Matt, you told us, I'm pretty sure it was you that said in the Mountain, it was kind of like everyone kind of knew we kind of relax a little bit for the first half of the race, and then the real race begins in the second half. Correct me if it wasn't you, but someone did tell me that about the mountain region.
I actually can't remember if that was me or not, but that is kind of what it is. It was always funny. I think my first 2 years in the Mountain region, the guys who are actually trying to control the race a little early on were the guys from UTEP. They would go hammer to the front and try and slow things down. And I just remember it's this massive pack and everyone's talking and joking, and because everyone is trying to make it feel like they're not taking it that seriously, unless you're an individual and you absolutely have to qualify as an individual because you can't rely on your team. The teams, for the most part, who know they're kind of safe, sometimes there's like this jokey, fun, light atmosphere through the first part of it, and then it gets serious as the race goes on. But I love seeing teams who are pack running for something like this, where they're just like, we know the best thing we can do is find each other in the race, because that's a good strategy to use, try and run together, and then maybe, I don't know, maybe kick it home in the last couple K, but 10K is a long way when you're this close to nationals, so you want to try and conserve as much energy as possible.
Now, I have to ask here, I know you mentioned that you thought there were 3 teams that maybe could finish at 4th place there on the day in nationals. You see NAU moved to 6th. They moved up a few spots there. They finished 3rd in their region. From your perspective, Matt, what did you see from NAU this weekend? Are they one of those teams you think could finish 4th there? What do you think you could see for them this weekend?
Yeah, when I was talking about the 3 teams, I was actually putting NAU in there and bumping Arkansas out. No, I wasn't. But NAU, I've talked about this the whole season. They're in such a different spot to what they've been in the past, because they had lost so many guys the previous season. And this season has just been really up and down, really trying to figure out what their race tactics are, just trying to figure out what they're actually going to do at nationals. And I've seen some of the guys around and tried to get a good gauge. And I think the thing that NAU has going for them, which they've always kind of had going for them, is that the guys are just in a good mood. They're excited about nationals and they're ready to see what's going to happen on the day. I think this is one of the first times where they're probably not putting a ton of pressure on themselves to necessarily try and win. But I think they're up for the challenge of really trying to finish as low as possible and try and get themselves on the podium.
Well, yeah, I'm excited to see. Obviously, a big moment there for Mike Smith with his last NCAA cross-country championships with this squad after such a run that he's had. So really excited to see how they finish and hoping for a good day. Just if you're a fan of the sport and you followed what they've done, what you and your teammates were part of, it's been such a cool run. So it'd be great to see Mike off with another podium spot. And who knows? We talked with Sean Cleary about the good and the bad luck that can happen. Some good things happen your way, some bad things, you don't wish the bad things on another team, but again, it's that bad luck that sometimes creeps in at these moments. You never know what could happen. And NAU is a team with experience and knows how to run come championship time, so we'll see what happens. But with that, the men's rankings in the book, and obviously you can check out the full rankings on our website, rankings 1 through 31. We're taking a look this week at all the teams that have qualified for the NCAA championships. But with that, we'll take a look now at the women's rankings, and 11 through 20 here. I would say I don't see as many teams with big movements, but there is some definitely big movement. Florida, you see, moving up 11 spots into the 16th position there after their runner-up finish in the South region. And Washington, really, I think one of the big surprises here, falling 6 spots outside of the top 10 after having such a really strong early season.
Yeah, you mentioned Washington here. They fall out of the top 10. They did not finish within those top 2 automatic qualifying spots to book their auto bid to nationals. They finished in the at-large position there. They finished 3rd in the West Regional, but they got beat by Stanford. They got beat by Stanford and Oregon, so you see them drop here a little bit. But then Florida, they lost to Tennessee at the SEC Championships, but they did not lose to them on the day at the South Regional, so they have a big bump there. They perform much better at regional, so you see some of that movement there.
And as we pivot to the top 10, 1 through 10 now on the screen. Again, a lot of these teams have been in the top 10 and a little bit of shifting of position, but really the big movers here, Stanford, you mentioned, beating Washington at the West Region, moves up into the 7th position, and NC State, who was atop the rankings, I think, in the preseason, on pace to try to defend their title, at least what people thought on paper, but then kind of fell back and now back into the top 10 for the first time in a while.
The NC State women had their best race of the entire season, I think, at the Southeast Regional. They won that regional title after not performing as well as they wanted to at ACCs, but then they come out to that Southeast Regional and beat a lot of those teams that beat them on the day at ACCs. They have a great low stick in Grace Hartman, who won that regional. And hey, they know how to win championships, so who knows what they could do this weekend in Madison.
You see Providence moving up in front of Georgetown, West Virginia, who talked to Coach Cleary, moving from 5 into 4, so now ranked in that podium position. Matt, on the movement you saw through that top 20, any things that, again, stand out to you or seem interesting come this weekend?
You always want to make sure you're at least having your best races towards the end of the season. So I think that's exciting for NC State and Stanford to finally be getting some really good ones on the board. And hopefully that just means they've been slowly building momentum and they finally have that for the end of the season. You know, when I look at the top 4 in particular, I think that's going to be the podium. I don't know in exactly what order because I think a lot of these teams are so close, but I just can't see a team outside of this top 4 within the rankings right now finishing on the podium.
Ashley, you agree with that? I'm looking through the top 6 there, and I'm like, I don't know, maybe.
I mean, honestly, I think that brings up some valid points. You know, I think BYU by far, I think from what I've seen, I think they've solidified themselves as the favorite here to win. NIU has also performed really strongly. I mean, they finished second to them in the regional, and they've looked really well all season long as well. Oregon, I mean, they win the Big Ten, and then they go out and perform really well at West Regionals. We're seeing all those pieces coming together for them at the end of the season. And then again, West Virginia, I can't knock them for how they've ran. They had a big performance at pre-nats, even though they had, I think we all discussed some things they needed to improve. And then here they are, they finished second at Big 12s, and then they win the Mid-Atlantic Regional, beating a really good Georgetown team. And so I think I have to agree, these 4 may be my favorites as well.
Yeah, I agree with you guys on the favorites. Providence and Georgetown have been solid teams. They've got some low sticks up front. So again, this kind of plays into that on the day, what happens. And so I think I'd take the other opinion of there might be 6 of this top 4. I think after those 6, there's a gap. But I think we could see some shakeups depending on what happens. And again, who knows conditions in Madison? I think, Ashley, you looked at, I think, the early forecast. I haven't.
Yeah, so I know a couple days ago there was potential for snow in the forecast, just a little bit. But I think now the snow may have moved out. It's still going to be cold and windy nonetheless. I think the feel-like temperature I was reading may be 16 degrees or something when the race starts. So the weather still could play a factor with the cold.
Yeah. Interesting dynamic of all this. And Matt, on that piece, we'll get to individuals here in a moment, but just on the weather piece, if you're looking at the forecast and seeing what Ashley described, are you preparing any differently right now, or are you just like, hey, we'll figure it out kind of day before when we actually see what it's going to be?
I would say the biggest thing I'd be preparing is what I'm packing. Making sure that I do genuinely have all the cold weather things that I could possibly need. If anyone here, any coaches or athletes are hopping on listening to this, then there's a couple of things I would really recommend in terms of making sure that your body's in a good place going into the race. And one thing, and this was a mistake that I made when I raced in Wisconsin when it was really cold, and hopefully most athletes don't do this because it's kind of a silly thing to do anyway, but do not wear your race kit under your warm-ups. Because when you're going on warm-ups, you're going to overdress and you're going to sweat a ton and you're going to wet your kit. And then you get on the start line, you strip everything off and you're freezing cold and it hits you immediately. So do not do that. Do not make that mistake. I made that mistake and it sucked. So do not do that. There's little things you can do to try and insulate your body. You can put Vaseline on. I think we might have talked about this at one point. It feels horrible, but it can help insulate your legs a little bit. Doing things which are really easy to discard. So putting on headbands, wearing arm sleeves, gloves, all of those kinds of things are just, you would much rather be on the start line feeling warm and start out the race warm and being able to discard things than being on the start line cold, because it means that first mile it's gonna suck. And my last point is that I had a really hard time with how the first mile really took the air out of my lungs because of how cold it was. I wasn't anticipating taking deep breaths of that cold air through the first section, which is pretty much just a sprint, how much that actually kind of hurts a little bit. So be prepared for that. If it ends up being really cold, if there's possibly going to be a bit of snow, as an athlete, just know that first mile is going to feel pretty rough, and then once the pace settles, you'll be okay.
Words of advice there. Everyone, get your checklist out, pack the things. I like the warm-up advice. That's a good one. That's a good one. It seems, when you say it, it seems kind of obvious, but I think we've all warmed up. We got all our stuff on. We're trying to be efficient with time. All of a sudden, you take your things off and ice cold. But we've got four titles to crown. We've talked about the 2 team rankings on the men's and women's side, but there's an individual race. And with that, we will look at the top 10 individuals, starting with the men. You see them on the screen. And actually, we have, I think, a couple pieces of movement. One, I think 2 new faces here, 3 new faces to the rankings. But really, I see up front, Graham Blanks, Haptem Samuel, a little reverse there after seeing Haptem on top of those rankings for the last few weeks.
Yeah, we see Graham Blanks is now number 1 going into the weekend where he's looking to defend his individual title. Whether or not Samuel or Blanks should be number 1, I don't know, because I mean we saw Haptem Samuel beat Graham Blanks at pre-nats. However, I guess Haptem Samuel did lose to Solomon Kipchoge over the weekend at the Mountain Regional, so perhaps that's some of the movement there. I do have to call out though. I mean, look at how many people from the Midwest Regional are in these rankings. I believe there's 6 men in this top 10 that are from the Midwest, and they're all from basically Oklahoma State, Iowa State, and then a couple Texas Tech there. So we'll see if that holds true on the day this weekend, if it's Midwest dominance per se.
Yep. Yeah, Kip Kemboy from Oklahoma State, big jump in there. Michelle from Iowa State, big jump into the top 10. So, these are teams that we've been talking about that have that podium contention and really national title contention along with BYU and Arkansas. So not surprised to see some, but to your point, the Midwest region well represented there. Matt, any surprises for you with that Midwest depth, or just where the top 10 shakes out going into this weekend?
Not a whole lot of surprises. I am still happy to be seeing teams with multiple athletes in the top 10. So your Iowa State, your Oklahoma State, I think that's going to give them a lot of confidence heading into nationals that how I think this race is going to run, I think it's probably going to be hard from the start, and it's going to be foot on the gas the whole way if I were to predict, just because of the caliber of athletes who we have in this field. And so having multiple athletes who could potentially go with that move, I think is going to be great. The movement with Blanks into first place is it's the same thing. It's like, this is regionals. He won a tactical 10K, which is great. But we know Graham Blanks. We know that he can race. He knows how to win tactical races, which is perfect. But how is he going to fare in potentially an all-out 10K in the freezing cold Madison, Wisconsin? I don't know. I think this is, I probably wouldn't have moved it. If this were me manipulating the rankings, and I assure you I am not, I probably would have kept Haptem Samuels in first place. But look, man, we're going to see.
Yeah, I think the algorithm gave Graham a generous bump there. So Haptem, may or may not see that and be like, I've already got this guy. So, but that's why we run the race. And one thing to look forward to, hinting ahead to Wednesday this week, our team was in Boston a week ago, so we may see some action from Mr. Graham Blanks in one of his final tune-up workouts at the end of the season on FloTrack come Wednesday. So look out for that. But top 10 individual men are out there, and now we're going to go to the women and see how things stack up heading into the weekend. Ashley, really a huge move there with Oregon, jumping up 17 spots into the top 10. A lot of these women kind of just shifting places a little bit. We see Kaylee McCabe from West Virginia moving up 5 spots into the top 4 now. But yeah, again, any surprises here for you?
I mean, not really per se. I guess the one that like you could look at, again, maybe some sort of, it's kind of similar to the Graham Blanks Habib Sandal situation, right? Like some flip-flopping here. Hilda Olamoimoy now goes to number 1 here on the rankings. However, if you look at how the results played out at the South Regional, her and Doris Lemengole essentially tied. So, you know, some movement there at the top, but it'll be her and then Doris and then Pamela Kosgei, who has performed really well in Madison already this season. Kayla McCabe of West Virginia, I think she has continued to show that she's among the favorites to finish top 5 at NCAAs, and she won the Mid-Atlantic Regional pretty dominantly over Georgetown's Chloe Scrimgore, so seeing her move into that top 5 there I think is big. And then, as you mentioned, Solon Ildes of Oregon, she finished 2nd at the West Regional this weekend. She won the Big Ten Championship in just her first race of the season, so if you're looking at what she's done this season, she's gotten a win and then a runner-up position, so I think she's definitely going to be someone to look out for come Nationals.
Matt, your take on how the women's top 10 stacks up?
Yeah, this is going to be such an awesome race, particularly between Pamela, Doris, and Hilda at the front. I almost can't pick a winner. I think they're all going to be there. There's going to be a massive kick at the end. I don't think they're all super strong, but I don't know exactly who's going to be the strongest to drop any of them. I think they're all going to be in great spots. It's always interesting seeing how, like we were talking about, seeing how people take regionals, and Hilda actually eased off the gas a little bit coming into the finish line and almost let Doris sneak in there for the win. Where I think there's a difference between men's and women's races at these regional championships is that it's just the women, I think, have a better opportunity to go closer to all out, just with it being a shorter distance. The guys you ideally shouldn't do that or can't really do that because it's so close to nationals that the risk of you frying yourself is relatively high. But I think for the women, because it's a shorter race, they can genuinely actually give it a really good, hard, honest effort. So I think seeing Hilda and Doris really, really going after it at the end there, that was probably them genuinely fighting for the win there. So similar to the guys. I mean, it's just hard to know who to put in the first place spot there. But I think particularly between those top 3 in the rankings right now, it's going to be an incredible race.
You always want to see the top contenders race each other. It's rare that we get the two of the best, I should say, so evenly matched, lining up at a regional and really duking it out to identical times. So again, throw all the names into the hat once you get to Madison, along with those 2 women, and we're going to see some fireworks, I think. So really, really excited to see that. Guys, the rankings are out. I think we got one show left, which will be after Nationals, which means we kind of will know how things shake up at that point. But we will be out in Madison. Ashley, what should people look forward to this week?
I mean, goodness, we have all sorts of stuff going down this weekend. At Nationals, we're going to be arriving on Thursday. On Friday, we'll be having an on the ground at the course in Madison, a live to tape, ranking show previewing all the action that's happening on Saturday. So you won't want to miss that as me and Ryan kind of break down all of the action that you can hope to see this weekend. And there may be even some HOKA activations. Is that right? Yeah.
We'll be out there with Matt's HOKA crew, and they'll be on site. I think it will be Friday evening for those of you that are fans coming to Madison. Look it up. We'll have some information, but we're looking to get a run and a meetup on Friday evening to get everyone there to celebrate the big weekend that will take place in Madison. And then bright and early out on the course on Saturday. I think it's maybe a 9 or 9:30 a.m. start time. I forget off the top of my head, but earlier start than we've seen in some years. So we'll be out there bright and early with the cold weather, cold conditions, breathing in that deep breath of cold air that Matt described earlier. So Matt, as always, thank you so much for joining the show. And where will you be watching?
I'll be watching in flag. I certainly wish I could be on the ground this year, but with it being so close, I'll be leaving for Valencia just a few days later. So unfortunately, the travel wasn't going to quite match up. But yeah, I'll be watching somewhere here in Flagstaff. And I just want to put out a final note to all the athletes and coaches who are listening to this. All the best. Man, my last collegiate race was in Madison on this course on a freezing cold day, and it was such an incredible moment, but at the same time, man, I would almost give anything to be able to do another NCAA cross country race. You don't realize as an athlete just how fun it is when you're in it, because sometimes it's stressful and there's pressure and there's all these other things. But yeah, my note to athletes and coaches is just have fun, enjoy it. And personally, as someone who's going to be watching, I just can't wait to see all this action unfold.
Well, Matt, thank you so much again for joining us and the insight, and we wish you all the best for the Valencia prep, and we'll be talking with you soon. All right, Ashley, that's it. Thank you for a great season. I know we got one left, but it feels like this is the culmination of so much that's gone on. So it's been great to be here alongside you. It's going to be great to be in Madison to see all this talk we've had throughout the season shake out on the course up there in Madison. So thank you to all those that have been tuning in. Again, check out the full list of rankings for all the top 31 teams and individuals that qualified to the NCAA championships. With that is the FloTrack College Cross Country Ranking Show brought to you by HOKA, and we will see you in Madison.